Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to Nutmegged, the podcast where Yank and a Brit talk about the beautiful game from across the pond. I am Andrew, representing the Stars and Stripes here in Ohio, and we have Faisal holding down the crown for the UK in the Middle East, down in Dubai. How is life out there, my good sir?
Good, yeah, very good. Thanks, man. It's nice and warm weather at the moment. I'm hearing you guys are getting a bit of a cold, so I'm enjoying myself at the moment. It's good stuff at the moment.
Good, man. I'm glad to hear it. So we are finally back. We took a little hiatus. That was my fault because I am a college soccer coach and our season was coming to an end. So we had about a month of games where we went back to back to back. So essentially 3 games packed into 1 week. So we would play like on a Monday, a Wednesday, and then a Saturday. So life was crazy. So Faisal graciously said, hey, we can just relax, try to get done with the season, and then move on. So we have done that. The season has ended. So it was a blast. But there's another season going on that we have a lot of things to talk about because during our break, so much has gone down. Good things, sad things. We'll talk about a lot of those today. But before any of that stuff, just like the name of the podcast indicates, we're going to go with our Nutmegged of the week first. I'll toss mine in. It's an interesting one. It has to do with a recent transfer. So if you have been following soccer going down in Italy, you'll know that Morata, who seems to like change teams almost every season, Álvaro Morata, as we were talking about here, he has made the trek over to AC Milan, back to Italy, which he's been to Italy before. He ended up living in Corbetta. So he moved there, had to select where to go, lived in the town of Corbetta. And the mayor knew about this and posted on the mayor's Instagram, who has a lot of followers, welcoming him to town. So essentially doxing him, saying, yo, this famous footballer now lives in this small Italian town. Morata was not happy about that, which makes sense. So he posted on his story on Instagram, being essentially this long thing of saying, yo, thanks a lot for doxing me, man. That was not cool. Then the mayor posted back on his Instagram story saying bye and a post of the Inter badge. So just so much stupid little drama between Morata and this random village Italian mayor going back and forth. So not ideal from the mayor because, yeah, you don't want to be doxing any famous footballers that come to live in your little town. Like, that's cool. Like, meet with them, talk them up, say, hey, appreciate having you here, but probably should not be sharing on social media that he now lives here.
I think, to be fair, I get that. I think it's like an innocent. He's excited. He's an Italian mayor. He's excited. He's got a big player here, just telling that Italian passion's come out, and it's not really thought this through. That's probably what it is.
Yeah, I think so. It just makes me feel better because even as a coach, sometimes I get angry when like another coach says something or a player says something dumb to one of my players. Like I get angry about it, and I feel like I just want to yell at them, which kind of seems like the vibe of what this mayor did. He can handle Morata calling him out, and then when he got called out, he just got pouty and said, yeah, Inter's better anyway. Love it. Okay, Nutmegged of the week in Italian.
Yeah.
Done. Now what you got for us?
Yeah, of course. So mine is something that we're going to talk about in a second, about Manchester United's new manager, which is Rúben Amorim. So this is regarding we obviously know that his first game took place, I think, over the weekend, Ipswich versus Manchester United. And we know there's a very famous artist, one of the singer-songwriter, one of the best artists, obviously, of our time at the moment. Of course, Ed Sheeran, we're talking about here, is a big fan of the Tractors, and he was attending the game. Man United scored in the first minute, and then you can feel the energy tipping that way. But of course, as I'm sure many of you will hear, it was a draw. And at the end, the Sky Sports presenters, Jamie Redknapp, for example, Roy Keane, they're all speaking, and it's that part, when you have on the pitch, they've got it kind of pitch side, the stadium's basically left, and they're talking to Amorim and doing an interview. During that interview, they're obviously inquiring with Rúben Amorim. He's talking about his philosophy, talking through stuff, and Ed Sheeran just waltzes on behind Jamie Redknapp, just gives him like a big clutch, like cuddles him, and then he's like, high-fiving Jamie Redknapp, etc. in the middle, interrupting Rúben Amorim's interview here. And there's a zoom in. If you do check out the video, there's a little clip where it basically zooms in on Amorim's face, and you can see visibly annoyed that this is basically what's happened. And then there's a bit of a clip where you have Ed Sheeran going to Jamie Redknapp. I don't think he wants to speak to me, essentially. And Amorim goes, no, I don't, with like a smile on his face, like a cheeky smile on his face, essentially. And Ed Sheeran goes off. And there was a lot of that around social media, being like how rude it was, celebrity, who's he think he is, just coming in, interrupting, this is his first interview after a post-match interview, like entitlement, ... etc. And then he posts on his Instagram, apologies if I offended Amorim yesterday. I didn't actually realize he's being interviewed at the time. I don't know if I mean, fair enough. Was popping by to say hi and bye to Jamie, he says. Any other time, maybe. He goes, obviously felt like a bit of a whatever you want to put it in. But life goes on. Great game, though. Congrats to all involved. So, I mean, there's time and a place. I mean, we all obviously, Ed Sheeran is a great artist, but I feel there's a time and place. And Amorim's obviously wants to win the game. He's a bit of a light gloat, maybe. I don't know. I feel there's a time and place for that one, really. So, my Nutmegged is Ed Sheeran really there. So, have a little think. Maybe if they're talking with microphones, they might be having an interview. I'm just an idea, mate. So, yeah, that's mine.
Yeah, better awareness, you would think, especially from a high-profile famous person who is a singer/songwriter and in the media quite often. Yeah, you would know what's going on. At the same time, I'm kind of here for it. If I was not a Manchester United fan, which I don't even know if I am anymore, but having your like lower, smaller team beat a massive team like that, and then just kind of going off and not being excited, celebrating, all that stuff combined. I mean, I kind of get it. I get the vibe, but yeah, I would be a little pouty too if I was Amorim and all that stuff. So it is what it is. But now take us to Manchester United, because we've not gotten an update on our Red Devils in a little bit.
Yeah, of course. I mean, where do we begin here? This is an interesting one. So, as I mentioned already, Rúben Amorim from Sporting Lisbon is now the Manchester United manager. There was a bit of back and forward about his time. I'm sure we'll get into the specifics of it in a second. But having an insane 4 seasons at Sporting Lisbon, they were essentially not winning the league for quite a few years, brought them back to the top, scoring freely, great identity, philosophy employed in the team, young, up-and-coming, exciting manager, and was almost like potentially going to be the Pep Guardiola person to come in and take over Pep Guardiola at one point as well. But felt the right time, and in his own words, he is in the right place for him. Chose Manchester United to take essentially to become the head coach, which we'll get into. His interesting comment on this as well. So he's now the head coach of Manchester United, and that did obviously mean the end of Ten Hag, which I want to come on to first before we get into that middle bit here. So, firstly, what was your initial reaction when we heard about the Ten Hag sacking? What was your initial reaction?
I've been fairly consistent, and the consistency will continue. My thought was, I don't care. Having any manager set up in the weird structure that Manchester United has right now, it does not matter. I've talked about this probably for 2 years now on this podcast. They are in such shambles, which it's slightly getting better, so I'm okay with that. They're at least working on it. But just getting rid of a manager after a year and a half, 2 years, it doesn't matter to me. If you do not get the club structure, the atmosphere correct, then any manager that comes in will end up struggling. And we've seen that over the past 10 years now since Sir Alex Ferguson has left the club. It has just been a mess of different managers coming in and out. So for me, Ten Hag, he's the same as any of the other managers that were in before him. And Amorim is the same as Ten Hag before as well. I do like his tactical structure, which we can talk about in a little bit. I think that's exciting. However, he's not going to be able to be successful if the club is still managed incorrectly. But what was your thought? I know you are a little bit more into maybe the manager having an impact on Manchester United's vibe? What's your thought?
Yeah, I think for me, when I first heard it, I was not shocked, but I was shocked in terms of the manner which was kind of done. It felt kind of immediate. Yes, we were in a bad patch, but I felt like there was probably worse performances to sack him after. That's what I felt my initial reaction was. I felt like I get it. And there was that excitement as well. Like, okay, cool, who are we getting in next? But at the same time, it's Ten Hag, and I'm very up and down with him. But I was looking at some facts and figures here for 1 second. He has a 56% win ratio, right? Which is the only second win percentage to Jose Mourinho. And you could argue Jose Mourinho coming second was an incredible achievement to Man City. Let's be real, right? So there's that, and obviously better than Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, but by 1%. So that does say a lot. So Ole Gunnar Solskjaer 55%, Louis van Gaal 52%, David Moyes 51%, and good old Ralph with his open heart surgery. Comments about the club, maybe right, who knows. Ralph Rangnick was 37%. So it does, I don't think we can go finally in terms of we were in the gutter, because I don't believe we were in the gutter. I'll hold my hands up, we weren't in the gutter. We were performing badly 100%. There were definitely matches we should win, but it's never been a point where I felt like, which we'll go on to, there wasn't like a crisis, I would argue, for him to be sacked at the time he got sacked. That's my opinion on it. It didn't feel like we were technically 4 points from top 4. Yes, it was 13. It sounds worse. I get that. But we were like, we had a good run. We would have probably potentially back in contention at top half the table. So I didn't see it as like, oh my gosh, let's get him out territory. But hey, that's just my opinion.
So I think the statistics that you showed me about the win percentage, which is a cool graphic that I saw on social media too, I think that proves my point that regardless of the manager that you bring in, it's not going to matter. And all of the list of managers that were on there, some were higher tier, some were maybe past their prime, some were probably in their prime potentially. I think Louis van Gaal was a great manager to bring in, especially at the point where Manchester United was. All of those combined, all the differences, it didn't matter. They tried different things. They brought in now a no-namer of sorts, like certainly a great manager, but not someone that has the same pedigree of a Mourinho or Van Gaal or anything like that. So that is maybe the one difference that could be interesting to combine the set. But for me, it doesn't really matter. But let me paint the picture just really quickly. So they brought Ten Hag in 2022. Now, Ten Hag, good manager where he was in Ajax. Good tactical abilities, a little bit more of like a direct kind of in-your-face manager. I like that style. I think you have to have that style at a high level to some aspect to control the personalities. I even see that at the college level. You just have to be strict sometimes and set expectations and voice your opinion and just say, hey, my word is what you have to listen to, the end. So I don't mind that. But he did end up winning 2 trophies in his time, the Carabao Cup 2023 and the FA Cup 2024. So, like, not the worst manager in the world, and even a decent win percentage, as you had talked about. And then early successes, beginning of his career, but then obviously we know 2024, 2025 ended not so hot. They only had 3 wins in the first 9 Premier League matches. And yes, like you said, sitting 14th in the table. Not where they should be with a club that spends the amount of money that they do and having the pedigree that they have in the past. And then following the 2-1 defeat to West Ham, they kicked him out. That was October 28th of 2024. So then Ten Hag's reign comes to an end. About the same average of what they've had of those managers that came in before. So again, painting the picture, it's the same picture that we've been seeing for the past 10 years now. Bringing a manager doesn't work really around after an average of 2 years. Kick him out, try something new. So I'm not super excited about it. But let's talk about the new guy that is in. I think he's cool. He has a cool vibe about him. I actually like his tactical setup. So that's pretty neat. From your perspective, what do you think about our boy Rúben?
Yeah, I think when I first heard about his name popping up, I genuinely maybe I don't follow Portuguese football, right? So let's be honest. I'm trying to get a grasp of world football here, but it feels like Portuguese football was something that was fairly under my radar. I knew Sporting Lisbon were doing well, and I knew obviously you have certain strikers doing well, and I was aware of what he was doing, but I didn't really understand. So I remember watching a lot more content about understanding about what he's actually doing, and the way he's built that Sporting Lisbon team made me excited. I was like, do you know what? We've got players here. I think we've got players that could potentially unlock this style of play here. So for me, I was excited, and I started seeing more about his interviews, and I felt, I don't know what it's difficult because I've not had that before in a while, really, since maybe Mourinho time. But I just felt an air of like confidence, an air of a person that it just seems like it's got it under control. I feel like nothing would really like waver for him. I feel like he's very comfortable. Even that whole thing about when, maybe you might have seen the interview where we have a British journalist. It's at I think Sporting Lisbon are playing Man City, and I think it's just before that he's been announced as the manager of Manchester United, etc. And he's due to start in like 2 weeks' time. I think it's his last Champions League game with Sporting Lisbon, and they're asking one of the British journalists. He's having an interview purely in Portuguese, right? And the interviewer goes, "Oh, could we get a few words for you of you in English, if possible? Like, we about to manage Man United. What do you think the message sends to the fans who are not speaking English to us, etc.?" And he's like, not right now. Like, you'll have plenty of time, but not right now. There's just an air of it. Yeah,
that's cool. Like, I agree with you.
Yeah.
But how rude of that?
Incredibly rude.
Like, so rude to come into this press conference and to say, stop talking in the native tongue of yourself and the country, and then start talking to me in English about the team that you're not even managing yet. And he even did it in a rude way. Like, I saw that clip on social media. That is just so disrespectful. It just makes me so angry. And I think Emre handled it perfectly. So kudos to him. I appreciate the media life that he can kind of manage and the culture that he brings to that. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
That's exactly what I think. It's that vibe. And I feel like I've not had that in the manager in a while. And I feel kind of comfortable with that part of things. So yeah, when I first saw it, felt good about it, but I'm very similar to you. Who knows? That's my mind. I was like, do you know what? I'm going to give it a few more games to get an idea. What was so obviously Rúben Amorim played Ipswich. First things first, what was your thought of that game in particular, of the strategy that he'd employed? And then also, like, what does that say? Is he trying to crowbar other strategies in? Like, what does that say of his previous strategies?
Yeah, his tactical setup I do like, and it's going to take some time for him to fully be able to implement his tactical structure at Manchester United, because he has a total new group of players. He has to get to know them, some little quirks that each player has. It's same with any coach coming in to any level. You have to understand your players a bit and then get them to understand the different nuances. I'll give you an example really quickly, so I will mention this as many times as I can. Pochettino is the manager of the United States men's national team. We absolutely love that. I am so stoked about it. Yes, he is, and it's the best day of my life every single day when I remember that. So it's great. So having him around is wonderful. And the example I'm going to bring up from him is he has brought the players into camp. I think he's had 2 camps now. And the last camp that they were just in, they performed very well, which was great, very exciting to watch. But he even explained in some of the press conferences of saying, hey, I have a new group of players that I'm trying to teach my system to. So it takes some time for them to learn that. So I'm not throwing everything at them right away. I'm just implementing what structure I want, and then one of the tactical wrinkles that is unique to my coaching philosophy. So like one of the transitions between the right back, the right wing, and then a central midfielder. So there's a different type of transition that will happen during a certain sequence of play. And he said, we didn't implement that right away, but that was the first piece that we started to work on. And now that we've had 2 camps, they work on that, and that is good. So now next camp, I'll be able to introduce something new. So he talked about that in a press conference. It's going to be the exact same way with Rúben here, because he's going to need to slowly integrate his system. And I'll talk about some of his tactics that I do like really quickly. Runs a 3-4-3. I like the 3-4-3. It's a very versatile formation and flexible that you can do a lot of different things in. And as you switch to more of attacking or more defending, you can adjust that structure and system as you need. But he really likes to have a mobile center back in the middle of that. That makes me nervous because I don't know if we have the best or most mobile center backs at Manchester United, but there is a flip which he may adjust because, like, let's say Harry Maguire gets back into the squad, which there have been talks about that because he would perform most likely better in a 3-back system where he's the central, and then you have 2 faster flanking center backs. So that could be cool, and that could actually revitalize his career at Manchester United. I'm hopeful for that. But having those back 3, you have to have some type of mobile defenders. I don't know if we have that enough, but I do like having that back 3 structure because, again, tactically, you can shift forward and have less focus on defense and more structure and build up. And then when you need to shift back, if you have to, you can end up bringing some of those midfielders in the 4 back to play a little bit more defensive. And then even particularly with different individual players on different teams. So if you have like a Jack Grealish type of winger, then you can have one of those midfielders just track back and mark that individual. So if you have to do that for a specific player who's in form or something of that nature, or who has more speed, you can do that, which is really cool. I'm also a fan of the double pivot. We play that on the U.S. men's national team side as well. So then you have 2 players. He had players like Palhinha and Nunez who play in that pivot, which is really cool because they're very structured, and pairing someone that has defensive stability, but then also good ball distribution and a little bit more pace, using those in tandem is really strong. And if you end up having a player like Rodri in your team, like City does, that just anchor that is able to be one of those pivots, you're just a different team. And actually that's a little bit foreshadowing because when City miss him, they end up struggling as they have lately. So there's that. They also have wing back roles, which kind of are ending up being the 2 on the outside in the midfield. I like that role because that role is super versatile. There are a lot of great players that can be wingers that will play up, but then if you don't have wingers in your formation, you don't really get to utilize them. But then being able to drop them in at more of a wing back type of position. So another U.S. men's national team reference, Timothy Weah, typically a winger, a dangerous threat, but also has played wing back for Juventus and done pretty well in that spot. So that will allow you to utilize specific types of talented players that maybe don't fit into your typical formation. So that gets me excited as well. And that also helps on offense and defense. So the more that you can support both of those transitions back and forth, I'm excited about. The last thing I'll mention is with the attacking philosophy. So they operate pretty fluid with a front 3. The more that you can have up front for me on attacking situations, the better, because I'm a fan of having overloads. So the more overloads that you can bring in a 3-4-3, the better. And you can absolutely do that by creating more spaces, by bringing up those wing backs to use as more attacking type of players. He does that in a lot of situations, and he likes to press high. I'm just a fan of high press in general because it's fun to watch, of course, from fans, but then also it brings more attacking chances for you as a team. Also, on top of that, you have a shorter time span of defensive action. So I'll explain what that means really quickly. So when the other team has the ball, you press them, the amount of time it takes you to actually force some type of pass from them is considered the time of a defensive action. So you want that defensive action, if you're pressing and trying to win the ball, to be shorter because you want them to pass quicker. So that means that you're actually pressing them. So he does that type of structure that he's done previously in Portugal. So I am looking forward to seeing more high pressing, more fluid transition with the 3-4-3. So overall, I like his tactical setup, what he does. I don't know if Manchester United has the players to fully fill that out. So I'm curious to see if he'll adjust some of that a little bit, which I assume so. I'm just excited to see it.
Love that. I think it's really interesting to get that in-depth experience about from yourself in terms of coaching. That's really useful from our side to get an understanding of how they would play. I think that's really nice. But as you were speaking, I realized there's obviously one key person we need to shout out here, and that's Rúben Amorim. Like, as much as being like a club legend and growing up watching him. Exactly. Like, you know, one of my favorite players growing up in the Vodafone top, just great goals. What he's done, picking up, I would argue, the pieces of this Manchester United club after Ten Hag, it should not go unnoticed. Like, he's been great to really galvanize the players, give them opportunities. The number of games he won in that, you know, we could have done a bit of a decline on that respect, right? But I felt like he gave that energy, gave more opportunity. The players are playing more open, more fluidly. So we need to shout out Rúben Amorim for sure for him being in that gap, steadying the ship, because that's, I think, is extremely hard to do as a manager who's been an assistant, been there, has technically been part of the old setup, and then not part of the new setup, which I understand. I think he wants to play second fiddle or even fifth or sixth fiddle to a team already that Rúben Amorim's got together. So, just want to shout out Rúben Amorim.
I do appreciate him. I kind of wish that he was actually the manager because, again, for me, it doesn't really matter who you have as the Manchester United manager. It's still too much of a mess. Again, it's getting cleaned up a little bit, but it's way too early. So Ten Hag should have stayed, in my opinion, because you're just wasting money by getting rid of him now. And money is one of the problems that Manchester United seems to have in terms of managing it appropriately. We'll see if that gets better as well, hopefully. But just having him in there would be so cool. Van Nistelrooy, he's just an awesome dude. He looks classy, but he has a fun culture and vibe about him. So I kind of wish he was there just more for the vibes than anything. But overall, current state of Manchester United, up in the air. Not great recently. So they had the manager change. We'll have to see how it works out. I hope it's for the best, but the financial decisions are still questionable to me. It still seems like there's not a great structure for decision making. So overall, I really don't know what's going to happen. And my boy Rashford, I appreciate him, but even in the Ipswich game, the Tractor Boys, not great. So obviously gets the goal, good, makes a good run into space, and brings, I guess, the ball kind of down off that first touch and scores it in the back of the net as the keeper was coming out. Kind of no man's land. Poor job, keeper, from you. Regardless, the effort that he puts into games is clearly lacking. And that's something that I have to yell at some of my players about, to track back, to play with energy. He does not do that. I don't know what the issue is. It might be time for him to move on. And that's so sad because I love Rashford. He's from Manchester. He's also just a good human being, but I don't know what's up.
Yeah, Rashford's a tricky one because I'm with you. I think he's maybe potentially January might be his time potentially to leave for a period of time. Maybe it's like a loan situation or maybe it's like a top club. But yeah, we could stay here and talk about Amorim and the potential. But for me, I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful, right? I had Man United, feature top 3, I think, this season in my predictions. So I've got to be hopeful. I've got no choice, but I'm feeling that. But you spoke a little bit about obviously money and the potential setup and that side of stuff. There is one club which I don't think has a problem with that. Doesn't have a problem with money specifically. Has some world-class facilities.
And they've been sucking. Let's go. We're talking about Manchester City. They suck now, and it's great. And I was going to say, yes, you did say that Manchester United were going to finish in your top 3. I am very happy about how the season is playing out right now because I still don't think they are going to be top 3. I think I had them at the 5th slot, if I remember correctly. I also did not have City winning the league. I had them in the 2 spot. We're looking good.
I'm going to get into this, but I still think there's time. I'm going to tell you right now. I'll give you some reasons.
Get that jersey ready. Pack that kid up for me, baby. Ship that to the US of A. But yes, let's talk about the boys in blue. I'll kind of paint the picture just really quickly of why City are sucking right now. And we don't have to be nice about it. As we were kind of talking before we started recording, you said, yeah, we'll be somewhat cordial. I don't even care. I hate City. And even the take it or leave it at the end of this episode, which you'll want to stick around for, is about City. And I'm very curious. It's like a merge of City and United. I'm curious to hear your opinion on that. But City right now, they are experiencing the longest losing streak under Pep Guardiola with 5 consecutive defeats across all competitions. And like I said, that is the longest under Pep Guardiola since 2016. So he has been doing quite a good job. And of course he would be because he gets unlimited money pretty much. That's a conversation we can talk about for a long time as well. But they've conceded multiple goals in recent matches. They just not looked the same. And that includes a 4-0 loss to Tottenham. Watch that one. Quite exciting. I enjoyed that very much. And just recently, a 3-3 draw to Feyenoord, which they were losing. Feyenoord was losing 3-0. They came back and drew 3-3. Just ridiculous. Not something you expect from the champions and City in particular. But a lot of the reasoning behind this, there's a ton of different things. Soccer is hard in general. So being so consistent for so long, even with unlimited resources and maybe the best manager of all time, is so tough to do. So what they have done already is insane. But there are some chinks in the armor. We all knew this was going to happen when Rodri got injured. So we didn't know it was going to be this extent, but we knew they were going to struggle a little bit more than they have in the past. And we saw that previously, so there's data to back it up. Rodri got injured last season as well, and City just did not look the same without him in that pivot role. He is such a great player. I know I referenced him earlier. Having a player like that can really make such a difference. But yeah, he got the ACL injury, so he is out for the season. So they need to figure out something to do to replace him. There's also other injuries that have been plaguing City as well, and particularly in an area where they maybe need some more backup in the back line. So Nathan Ake, Ruben Diaz, they have had injuries, and Knox struggled with fatigue issues. So that is something that has really brought down their backline performance, just so inconsistent. And then when you bring in a player like Haaland, you essentially are saying you are now the focal point of our offense. And really, it's been predictable in terms of what they try to do from an attacking standpoint, because he is that focal player and you know how he plays. And it's similar to like a Robert Lewandowski. You know how Lewandowski plays. He's not going to be getting behind the line, so that limits the options that they have. So City, I think, has been doing the same thing. Now, Guardiola, for his part, he's not blamed any of the players. He just said, hey, we got to step back. We have to look at what we're doing, try to refigure out the strategies of what's working, what's not working. But obviously, he's been super stressed on the sideline. And during press conferences, you could just tell that there's a different type of edge to the conversations that he has. And opponents are just doing a good job of countering the high possession that Guardiola usually exploits against most teams. But now they have kind of learned this, and the combo with Erling Haaland, the high possession, with that high possession, they have those high fullbacks, so there's space behind them. So teams are now specifically trying to utilize that space behind the fullbacks, and really that's how a lot of chances have been coming up for the teams that are going against City. And the press, the intensity that City usually has with that press has dropped. So other teams have more time on the ball, which is something we've not really seen during Guardiola's reign with City as well. So that's another factor that is a bit interesting and provides a different nuance. The squad is getting older, as we've seen with a lot of injuries. There's fatigue. A lot of key players are over the age of 30. And then some of the recent signings that they have made, which is also another rare thing for City, have not hit. So Jeremy Doku, good player, but just not as consistent. Nunez, the same, just not as consistent as they thought he would be coming into a City lineup. So a lot of questions. And is this the end of the reign of terror?
As you were speaking, I had a couple of thoughts in my mind in terms of where the problems lie. I don't think there's a couple of things. Number one, as we spoke about, obviously, since we've been away, Ballon d'Or winner, Rodri. So I just immediately in my mind came up with a conspiracy in my mind.
I ignored the Ballon d'Or on purpose because I hate it and it's stupid. But yeah, great player.
But I mean, you could argue that people from the Real Madrid team agreed with you, and that whole thing about them not even just throwing the toys out the pram when they found out that
drama babies.
I just feel like, oh, come on, man. It's just so for the context, of course, Rodri won the Ballon d'Or, which I think is correct. I've always been a fan of that, and I think it's so important in the modern game to have a player. Every team, like is crying out for a player of Rodri's level. There's no two ways about it, right? Like as a player, there's that, but also the Spain team, right? The way he played that England midfield, like I think he's been crucial. You bring him out of a lot of the teams, cool. Vinicius Jr. is a great player, but I don't think you can compare the two together. What Rodri has done for the team, and ironically what he's done to Man City for the time being in the moment without him being there, right? There's definitely some facts and some stats about the amount of games they've won with him not being on the pitch or within him being on the pitch. There's a clear difference between that. So I think Rodri's one key factor in this. Another thing I would say is I don't think you can blame injuries. Man United was a point where we were literally on the skin of our teeth with certain players. Martinez was injured at one point. Luke Shaw has been out for God, I don't know how long, right? All we really need is also like one player. There were times where Bruno Fernandes has been out. Like I'm not comparing because I would argue they're in different teams, but like there's been other clubs which struggle with injuries, massive injuries, and still managed to get out a draw or were not as poor of a run as that would be the case. And the third thing, as I was thinking as well, are the charges, these 115 charges, let's not forget this, ladies and gentlemen, right? 115 charges, is that creeping in to the players' heads, into Pep Guardiola's head? And is that kind of light pressure, right? Like if I had a case looming for a club that I manage, does that also add pressure? Does also feel like that puts you in an awkward position? You can't really open out completely. I don't know. That's just my initial thought, but I'm happy to see it. But at the same time, it doesn't do good for the competitive nature of the league. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm happy about it.
I am also happy that they are struggling. I am just curious to see what will happen. I still think that they'll finish in the top 4, although it is tight right now, our Premier League table. Of course, it's not even Christmas yet, so there's a lot of time to go. But I'll just paint the picture of our top 5 right now. Liverpool, the boys, sitting up top at 31. We have 23 points for Manchester City, so a little bit of a gap. We like to see that. Chelsea, I also had them in my top 4, sitting on 22 points. Feeling pretty solid about that one as well. Arsenal at 22, I have them winning the league, so that one hurts me a little bit. They can step it up, though, but they've been in some rough form lately. But then Brighton sitting in 5th, 22 points. So we have an exciting Premier League campaign coming up this Christmas season. Should be good. I'm excited to watch this.
I still think City win it. I know it sounds
Get away from
ludicrous. Mate, I'm telling you right now.
You are ludicrous.
January
Call 'em up.
window.
Sing a song.
No, January window, Pep Guardiola is going to change. Let's clarify something. They have Erling Haaland. Let me get into it. I know he's not been flowing, and maybe he needs that thing, right? I get that. But I genuinely think if Erling Haaland gets on a run like he's done previously, they could pull together a string of like 10 games with no losses. Then that puts a pressure back on the team. Or if you look at, you mentioned there's 8 points between the top two. Is that correct? Yeah, 8 points. Liverpool really, they lose a handful of games, maybe 1 or 2 games. Yes, they probably don't look like we're losing them all, but they slip up maybe a draw here and now and then. And City are consistent, potentially in the new year. I've really written off this Christmas, I'll be honest with you, right? I think City are going to go up and down at the end of this Christmas. But I think in the new year, transfer market opens up. They're going to bring them some players. They're going to give whatever Pep Guardiola needs. They're just going to be charging. And I don't think they lose a game the second half of in the new year. There's something that Pep Guardiola does to his team to galvanize. I genuinely think they still win it. I'm telling you right now, Liverpool will bottle it. Arsenal will bottle it. City have pedigree, then none of those clubs have got.
It is so difficult to do what City has done. Granted, they have unlimited resources and the best manager, but you just can't do that. Even if you have all those things in place, to have that happen so consistently in the Premier League is so hard to do. On top of that, all of the issues that I've already outlined as well, I don't think that they'll be able to carry the boat to keep it afloat. I'm rhyming like ludicrous now too. Let's go. I really don't think that they'll have enough to get to the top and to fight off the teams like an Arsenal, like a Liverpool. I think they'll be in the conversation for sure. I just don't think they'll win it. Huzzah.
We shall see. You mentioned it'll be an interesting watch, right? So obviously watching football.
What a transition.
There we go.
I like it.
So watching football is something that we've done growing up. Both of us watching football, the Premier League is always something that we've always done. There's been times where it's been on terrestrial TV, and more recently, it's been costing an absolute bomb to watch however many games they have, to watch Premier League, Champions League, the whole shebang. I don't know how many in the UK anyway, in Europe. Sky Sports package with a BT Sport or whatever, TNT, wherever it's gone now. There was Setanta Sports around back in the day. There's a whole bunch of these terrestrial channels. But something might be coming. Something may be coming to potentially allow it. It's coming. It's coming. Allow us to watch something that's been long overdue. Andrew, what you got for us? Do you want to give us a lowdown?
This story is bigger than any of the things we've already talked about in this episode. So be ready for this because it impacts the individual soccer or football fan. So that's why this is so important. It is nicknamed Premflix.
Premflix. I love it.
Yeah, they have a couple different nicknames for it. That's my favorite one, so I picked that one. That essentially means that all of the watching ability all of the games, how they're streamed or brought to you, the consumer, for the Premier League will be changing. I'll paint this picture for you. The Premier League just ended, or will be ending, but agreed to end already, the 20-year partnership with IMG. And IMG has been the company that has been producing and distributing the media, the rights, all the video, all of that stuff for the Premier League. For 20 years, that partnership is going to be done. And in 2026, all the production and distribution will be brought in-house. That is insane from any type of business organization to do something at that level with IMG, a company that does that for a living. So they're essentially outsourcing that, which makes sense because that is an insane job. And that is, IMG is a massive company and corporation that has the people, the technology, the billions of dollars to run something like streaming and pushing out all of the games that you watch in the Premier League. Bringing that in-house is nuts. So that is crazy, first off, but they're going to be doing that. And this is similar to what the NBA and the NFL do already. So they bring a lot of their stuff in-house. They still distribute rights and things like that, but they manage most of it themselves and then determine how games are published. So like it's NFL Ticket or NFL Game Day or the NBA Game Watch and all this kind of stuff. So you can find all of the games in a specific location. That's essentially what the Premier League wants to do. So what this is, it can look like a variety of different things. There's no structure talked about yet, just people making up ideas of what it could look like. Maybe it's at a streaming service that the Premier League publishes themselves, and then people can subscribe to that, and then you can watch all the Premier League games. I mean, that sounds pretty sweet. But ultimately, this just means more control and more money for the Premier League, so that's why they're trying to make this move. I mean, if they get the right people in charge, I think it could end up being pretty cool. One, for the consumer, because you can potentially watch all the Premier League games in one place on your phone and have it with you wherever you want. If it's done right, that would be pretty sweet, because for an American, it is tough to find Premier League games. I usually get to watch maybe one or two on the weekends. So being able to do all of the games at once, be able to have the option to watch those would be spectacular. I wish that this would then maybe spread to the championship so I could watch Hull City. That'd be pretty sweet because it's hard to find any Hull City games. But do we want another streaming service to watch all these matches? I would say most people do because it's tough to find. Now, the last piece I'll mention is the challenge. This is going to be a very difficult job for them to do, to bring all of this stuff in-house. You're going to spend a lot of money to do this, and it's a risk because broadcasting rights bring in a massive chunk of money for the Premier League. So is that going to mess up those types of partnerships? They're going to have to manage that in-house now, and they won't have the same type of relationships. It is the Premier League, so probably most places will still want to figure out some way to get money on that. But broadcasting rights, regional licensing agreements, regulatory regulations, that is so much to manage. That is an entire company in and of itself. So it's going to be interesting to see. Long story short, I am here for this move because I want to be able to watch more Premier League stuff. We all know that sports and really any entertainment stuff is all about money. We know that's the thing. It's not going to change. So if I can at least watch stuff, I'll be happy.
Couldn't agree more, man. This is, I think, such a key change that potentially may come on the horizon. Imagine being able to watch everything in one place. And just to add some color for the current state of play, 2019 was when the first sort of streaming site, which was, of course, Amazon Prime, the Prime Video, had matches, actually streamed some matches. A couple bit of lagging when the first start, it wasn't as smooth, but then just, of course, that was the beginning for a lot of people. And just the current state of play, I think back in maybe 2022, it's probably increased quite a lot since then as well. But the average team, the average Premier League team, so there's something called the Central PL Funds, right, which is essentially a big fund which has bought in all the international right, or the TV rights, for example, also the foreign kind of rights to put in the matches abroad as well, right? That roughly equates, or would give roughly, foreign rights alone is 1.4 billion. So that's a crazy amount of money. But that, for the Premier League fund, each club, by the way, would roughly get around 135 million goes into that fund. And that's even before, for example, you have your sponsorship deals, your rest of the cup wins, for example, all that sort of money. So it's incredibly lucrative for a lot of these clubs, especially to sell the rights, for example. So I do think it will be a struggle, for not to say that there will be some obviously backlash. I think there'll be the the rights and specifically the TV rights will not want to escape will without a fight for sure. They're definitely going to fight this. They're going to try and offer some other streaming opportunity or create their own streaming opportunity on the side of it. But it would be insane to be able to do that, to watch all the matches in one place and not have to I've always maintained this. I would happily 100% pay for a pass of sorts to watch like Premier League football. Like it's actually a no-brainer. I think you'd get such a huge amount of like money off the back of it. You could turn it into something like a Netflix or an Amazon Prime, etc. Like people are crying out for it. It's so long overdue that it would be insane to put together.
The hard part is the money. So I'm curious to see how this will play out because, yes, tons of people would sign up for this subscription. But then you have to make sure, as the Premier League, this subscription will generate enough income to counteract what you are currently getting in a deal from like NBC. Because, as an example, NBC would purchase some of the rights to be able to show those games on their network. Then they make money from the advertisers that are then advertising because people are watching those games. Now, if this happens, there's a streaming site for all of these games, then that gets diluted. It's not as valuable because NBC say, hey, we're showing the game between United and City. But then it's also available on the streaming site. So why would I go onto a TV and turn on NBC when I could just watch it on my phone or have it on YouTube TV and just click on the Premier League streaming service? So they're not going to be getting as many rights now. And with that, meaning as many pieces of change shoved into their piggy banks. So it's going to be interesting if they can balance the income versus loss of income that will happen with this. Time will tell. It's still super early, so we'll have to see what it looks like.
With as you're speaking about sort of like viewing, streaming rights, etc., we know obviously where a lot of the eyeballs are at the moment. Twitch is huge. YouTube is huge. Lots of sporting videos, content is on there. And I thought you might have heard this already, but just something that's a new initiative that's going to be dropping in the moment in February 2025. It's called the Ballers League. So it's something I think is very similar to what Jared Piqué might have done potentially with the Kings Cup, Kings 11, Kings League, I think it is. So it's going to be in the US and the UK. I'm just going to reel off a couple of things for you on this, right? So it's going to be a competitive 6-a-side football league, right? That's going to combine traditional game with new rules. I love the concept of new rules. I think it's so well needed. It makes it so much more exciting, right? So we obviously know the big three of BBC Sport in particular. We obviously have Gary Lineker, Alan Shearer, and Micah Richards, who we know are three favorite in terms of the punditry team they have in BBC. So they'll be the new. So Gary Lineker is being named the UK League manager, and they have Alan Shearer and Micah Richards taking on coaching positions. So imagine that, right? So you've got those two as coaches, right? You've also got joining them in manager coaching positions, by the way. You've got John Terry, right? Luis Figo. So already the big names are coming in to manage these teams. Jens Lehmann, the Arsenal goalkeeper, Robert Pires. We have Freddie Ljungberg as well. So these players, ex-players, professional players from who had crazy industrial careers are going to be manager coaches of this insane new Ballers League, which is going to bring so much eyeballs to the TV. We also have Brazilian icon Ronaldinho, who's going to be managing a team in the US League. Less known about the US League, but to have Ronaldinho as a manager, just imagine the technique for that team is going to be crazy. And then we go into like YouTubers, for example. So like we've got Mini Minter, who you might know from YouTube. We also have Toby as well, Angry Ginge, who we may have watched on YouTube before. Lots of these commentators as well. They're going to have key managerial role, and they're also going to have to manage their own teams as well, which is really great to see. You can imagine that. KSI, this is where it's really interesting. So this is where you can see the interesting part of having these big names. So KSI. And also, I show Speed, so Speed, the US Speed. They're both going to be named president. One's your president, KSI is president of the UK, and I show Speed is your president of the US. It feels like I'm just reeling off some sort of like fantasy development of some sort of thing they're going to create, but this is actually happening. And then, of course, you have Chunks, which will be live streaming it, which will begin in March 2025, and it's going to last 2 months, ending in May next year. So you can imagine just 2 months of like YouTube, Twitch, watching this six-a-side football. And there's trials are ongoing as we speak at the moment. So literally, if we want to, you or I could go out now. If you want to, they're doing trials in Manchester and London. And it's literally former academy players, street ballers, free agents. So there could be even free agents in there. You can have futsal players, retired professionals, semi-professionals are all ready to take part. And if you haven't seen the trailer for it, go and check it out. It looks insane. I think is definitely the place where football's heading towards now. It's almost not a little breakaway, but the fact that I'm excited for this, to be able to kind of see just the variety of teams, having also the support of such big players in the YouTube world, but also in the BBC Pundit team. So I am excited. And I think this is definitely where it's going. Twitch, YouTube, it's where the kids are at. It's where the majority of the viewership is going to be. So yeah, it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about this, but it does sound pretty cool. I was on board until they said Speed and KSI were presidents. Like, that's just not how you run a company. Granted, both of them have great brands, so I'm excited to see what it will look like. It sounds fun, and hopefully I can catch a match here in the US of A very soon. That's what I'm on. I want to watch it. Yeah,
we'll watch it on YouTube. It's everywhere. So
well, I'm going in person. We're going on a road trip, my dude.
Let's do it, mate. Let's do it.
Yeah, 100%. We're bringing Nutmegged on the road. We're going to be bringing it to you live. All the good action you need to know. We're reporters on the ground.
Love that.
But before we do that, let's sign off with our take it or leave it. As promised, mine is related to our conversation about Manchester United and City. So now, take this or leave it. If Pep, I'm already getting nervous saying his name. If Pep Guardiola was the manager of Manchester United, he would be able to right the ship in 2 years and 2 months. Are you going to take that or leave it? Think about it for 1 second. I give you that specific time frame on purpose.
Can you repeat that? Say that again?
Yes.
So
if Pep Guardiola was the manager of Manchester United, just taking over right now, he would
be over right now. Yeah.
Yep. He would be able to right the ship in 2 years and 2 months. The reason I have selected 2 years and 2 months is because that is the average tenure of all of the managers that have been in their position as manager of Manchester United since Sir Alex Ferguson. So are you going to be taking this or are you going to be leaving this?
So before I come to a decision that I had to think, so right this ship, I think that's about perspective here. So my initial thought is right the ship, I'm assuming means like league dominance. In 2 years, I would argue that maybe
top four
comfortably.
Consistently?
So here's the difference. I think top four, I 100% agree. I think if that means righting the ship, then cool. I think there's no two ways about it. He confidently does that. And that, for me, is because he's an insane manager. But also, I think in those 2 years, his transfers that he'd bring in and the amount of players that would want to play for just Pep Guardiola as a whole, as a manager, right? Man United to go into a place where they're comfortably top four and challenging but not winning. If the question is, do we think we win a league in 2.5 years' time? I don't think so. But does he get us a top four? I would say comfortably. Comfortably, Pep Guardiola does that. If he takes over now, he makes us top four comfortably. And that's because he is a manager, his pull as a manager, and to top it all off, his transfer market would be insane. Those three reasons. So I'm going to take it.
I'm going to leave it because I will be consistent with what I always say. It's not about the manager. It is about the state of the club. And I am still not saying in 2 years, Manchester United will be in a place where it will be good. The caveat I will say is that, like Sir Alex Ferguson, he essentially controlled the club. Maybe not the best structure for longevity, which we're seeing now. I think the only way that he actually rights the ship and then gets consistently like top four easily every season is if he takes on that Sir Alex Ferguson role and is in control of more things. In modern football, I don't know if that's the case. He also won't have as much money as he did at City. He probably won't have as much control if he actually would take this type of position as well. So I'm going to leave it because I really don't think that Manchester United are in the state where any manager can come in and right this ship, which you mentioned righting the ship is subjective. And it is sad that just getting top four consistently is righting the ship, but that's where we're at.
It is true, but I just think the level of Guardiola. Yes, I get the past few months or the past few games, it hasn't shown that, but I think genuinely give it time, he'll have him running again, and he'll be righting his own ship. I can tell you that for a fact. So mine was related around Ten Hag. So what I wanted, and you kind of briefly mentioned it, but I just want to give you an opportunity to just to kind of zone in on and focus in on it really. And I know where you are on this, really, too fast. This is kind of like a take it or leave it, which I was keeping for later, where you kind of spoke about it now at the beginning. But Ten Hag should have been given more time. And I know where you're at with this one at the moment, but do you genuinely think that given more time, Ten Hag would have made us top 4 this season?
I do not think he would have made us top 4 this season. However, I am going to take this, but you can insert any name where Ten Hag's name is, and I would take it. Because any of the managers who, again, averaged 2 years and 2 months, that was the average between all of the managers since Sir Alex Ferguson. They need more time to implement a system, especially in the most difficult league in the world, to be successful. On top of that, the club is run so inefficiently that you're bringing in these managers, you then sack them, you then pay that manager for the rest of their contract on top of the new manager that you need to bring in. So they just offered Ten Hag a new deal previously. So if you even had this inkling of saying, this could be something we do, maybe we sack him, why would you then even offer him a contract? I think it's just pointless to waste that money, and it is so wasteful. And we know Ratcliffe is all about saving money because he's been cutting jobs, and people have been freaking out about that, which that's how you run a business. Maybe the antics were not done correctly, and maybe there would have been a better structure or way to do it. But you have to make sure your organization, which a football club, a soccer team is an organization, you have to make sure it's run appropriately so that the organization itself is funding itself so that you don't need to continue to take out loans, which that's how Manchester United was run previously. And firing a manager and now needing to pay him while he just hangs out and maybe goes back to Ajax and then gets 2 salaries. Not a good way to run an organization. So I will not really care what name is in there, but I think he should have been given more time. Ten Hag should have run out the contract at least. Save yourself some money.
I think that's probably what I actually generally forgot that they'd actually given him a new contract, and that now really annoys me even more than it did originally. Now I think the timing of it is even worse. There was a whole thing, if you go back, it's actually really cringy about him being, after he won the FA Cup, like, this is it. This is now Ten Hag's time. It's going to bounce forward. We're going to have this whole thing. And I kind of got caught up in that. I still don't think it's a crisis. I didn't think Man United were in a crisis. But I just felt like they were like, we can't give you any more time anymore. That's it. I still think there was anything dramatically wrong. Like, I would be more shocked. Like, I mean, I was thinking, like, Pep Guardiola is going to know, like, he won't be sacked at all. I'll just clarify something, right? But it's just that feeling of, like, we weren't that bad. Like, we were poor, but we know we're poor. Like, we know we're at a point where we're going to be mid-table. So
look at the players we have on our roster. We are starting Diego Dallo. No shade. He's a solid player, a great role player, and I like him. I think he kind of plays a similar style that I do too, so I actually like him a lot. But starting for Manchester United, game in and game out, he is just not the quality of player that you should be having in a team like this going up against some of the best teams in the world. Our roster is full of maybe a couple players that should be here. Bruno Fernandes, sure. I mean, even Rashford is now questionable. They're just not the depth and level of players that we need to have starting regularly for us. How we played against Ipswich, the Tractor Boys, I'm going to say that every time I can. Our holding midfield was Casemiro and Eriksen. Both are maybe 33 plus? I don't even know. I just know they're old. Like, that's my age. They're almost my age. That's ridiculous. One, because that means I'm getting old. But two, they are well past their prime. It should not be starting in a double pivot for Manchester United. All right, I'm done. Bye.
I think we are done. I think we're going to have to close this one out. On that note, we have to close this one out.
I will always rant about how Manchester United just don't seem to have it together. But yes, fam, we are out. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Before then, jump on the Instagram account at Nutmeg Podcast to drop us a DM with your listener questions or take it or leave it submissions. Hopefully you're able to get out on a pitch somewhere in the meantime. But if you do, just don't get nutmegged. Peace.
See you guys.